The maze war that has lasted for centuries has finally come to an end. It was a war that took more than one generation. After defeating 1,000 maze masters, the captives were finally rescued. Among them were women, men, and even old men and children. Some of them did not even know what the sky looked like. Over the years, many children have been born in the labyrinth, who lost their mothers during the war. Some of them were forced to feed on monsters' milk to survive. Children had supernatural powers and were so large that they could hardly be called human. These children, in the long run, were known as dungeon children. Most people considered them a danger to society because it was unknown what they were capable of. But with the end of that terrible war, it's been over 10 years. And now the labyrinth is just a subject for scientists to study. These two are also from the science group. The girl did a little investigation and found out that the dungeon children are incredibly obsessed with him. However, like everything, there are exceptions. This guy was the only child from the dungeon who was incredibly afraid of him. And so he is also the only child of a dungeon with an unknown level. Many people think it's because he's weak, but there's a deeper problem here. After a short break, it was time to move on. Here, staying in one place for a long time is equal to death. Also, the main character asked that the guards not use their weapons in any way, even if they meet a monster. They need to avoid clashes with the current monsters at all costs. Many people thought that if the war is over, these monsters pose absolutely no threat. But this is a serious misconception. Everyone who thought so was an arrogant fool. While they are here having this meaningless dialogue, someone is being torn apart in the labyrinth. As you might expect, the monsters found them. These monsters are most often found on the lower floor of the geyser, despite the fact that they have already been wounded, and still it is worth avoiding direct contact with them. After all, if blood gets on their clothes, they will be an easy target for all other monsters. Oh shit. Of course the guards didn't take advice from the child in the dungeon, and decided to deal with the monster in their own way. Naturally, these savages opened fire and landed a full clip on the monster. It's hard to imagine a more reckless act, which made the monster even angrier and more ferocious. His howl was so strong that it was too much for my eardrums to bear, when suddenly the breathless monster's body fell to the ground, and that horrible screaming stopped. The guards were very surprised that they were able to kill the monster so easily. Their confidence was at an all-time high. But by doing so, they had only made things worse, when suddenly there was a terrible scream throughout the entire dungeon. The scream made people's blood run cold. It was Scream of the Hound Hunter, but he was still far away, so they had enough time to leave the dungeon and save their lives. But the guards were only thinking about money. After all, the monsters they easily killed were worth 5 million won, and for the hunter, they'll get 30 million won. They decided to stay. The heroes warned them of all the dangers, and said he would stay with them just in case. The guards just laughed and told him not to count on their money. This world is rotten to the core. All I can think about is money. A child of the dungeon asked me to follow him to the safe place. However, the researchers said they needed to remove the material. But the guy was persistent. His gaze struck fear into the soul. He obviously knew what he was talking about. The team moved on into the maze while the guards stayed put and waited for the monster, hoping to make a fortune. Explorers noticed that they were already walking along a familiar trail, and asked them to stop and explain to them what was going on. The child of the labyrinth told them they were getting out of here. After all, it's too dangerous, and the chances of survival are minimal. People can't believe that the reason this dungeon child is bypassing the labyrinth is because he's a coward, because these children are known for their incredible strength and bravery. And this one is completely different. When suddenly there was another scream throughout the cave, but this time it was a human one. That means the monster has gotten to the guards and they should leave quickly. Their screaming was just unbearable. It was horrible. You could hear their bones crunching. That's what pride leads to. As in the other characters say, they need to ASAP get out of this maze or the predators will come for them too. The predators came at the sound of gunfire. The one they killed was their prey. The girl couldn't believe he knew about it and stopped them. But if the hero tried to convince them, they would all be trapped. The blood got on their clothes, so they were doomed from the start. These predators can smell the cut of prey hundreds of kilometers away. The cameraman, seeing a drop of blood on his sneaker, realized he could be next. Suddenly something horrible appears in front of his camera lens. It can't be, it was a wolf monkey. That monster never went up to the first floor. Apparently the rules of the game have changed a lot, which means you're in incredible danger on the first level as well. Wolf monkeys are highly intelligent, and incredible strength and bloodthirstiness. Had they been following them the whole time, the group split up. Most of their group is beyond saving, but there's still a chance to save the young lady. We have to act now. There's no time to think. Luckily, the hero knew where he was going and took his blade with him. This is his first encounter with monsters in a long time. To attack a monster of such power head-on is reckless. Therefore, the first thing to do is to find its vulnerabilities. The most obvious place to attack was its huge mouth. The skin is the thinnest part of the body. No sooner had he dealt with one monster than the girl found herself at the mercy of another monkey. She has to hurry or she's dead. Realizing there was no way he was going to make it, he threw his dagger, hoping to gain a few seconds. While Monster was distracted, he grabbed the girl and said that they would now run as hard as they could. He warned her about holding on tight, and she might also have a couple ribs broken. Wow, that's speed. That's what the children of the dungeon can do. I wonder what other talents he's hiding. They managed to escape from the wolf monkeys. Now they could rest for a while. Suddenly the girl started crying and shouting that he was responsible for the death of her companions. She was sure he could have saved them, but why he didn't remains a mystery to her. But she apparently didn't fully understand his role in this expedition. After all, he was just a chaperone, not her bodyguard. Plus, he was warning them of the danger, especially since his contract didn't say he had to fight in case of danger. But the girl couldn't understand how he could do that when people were dying. The thing is, it's a gazer, and the girl hired a bunch of idiots who never came down here, and didn't take his advice. If they'd listened to the dungeon child in the first place, they'd all have survived. No, they wouldn't even have faced the monsters. The girl couldn't stop crying and asked him why he had saved her, if he didn't have to do that. It's really quite simple. If she died, he wouldn't get the money. It's very simple. He fulfills his part of the contract. She pays him money. This world is a terrible place. People have completely lost their sense of regret. When suddenly their conversation was interrupted by an incredibly bright light that came out of nowhere. Oh shit. They had found the entrance to the labyrinth. They need to get out of there before another monster comes out of the maze. And this one's even worse than the monster. They've opened the entrance to the labyrinth. This could be the beginning of the end for them. Welcome to the labyrinth. When the boy woke up, he was terrified he's really here again. On top of that, he had broken his left arm during the fall. Actually, it could have been worse. At least I'm still alive. Looking around, he realized his customer wasn't there. It was unlikely she would have squeezed out in a fall from that height. It was his money. But the worst part was that he's in the heart of the maze. And to get out of it, he has to go all the way and still manage to survive. The first thing we should do is look around. Surprisingly, he felt nothing at all. No presence of monsters. Could this be an abandoned part of the maze sign? As suddenly the snake that was it, the engraving suddenly hissed and its eyes began to glow as if they were fireflies. A moment later she attacked him and even tried to bite him. Even rocks are dangerous in this maze. Fortunately, he was able to react in time so that the snake could only bite his arm. But he won't last long here without medication with such a minor injury. Interestingly, it was also that the first people who entered the labyrinth told a certain legend. That the 18,230th Snake Liberator will inherit this dungeon. And who do you think he is? Still, he managed to survive the snake bite. He was incredibly happy about it, but still very surprised because he had clearly felt the snake's venom spray. Also, his bone had completely healed. Much less his arm, his whole body had completely recovered from the fall. But now there's no time to deal with all that. He needs to find a way out of the house as quickly as possible. Judging by the terrain, it was somewhere near the entrance to the first floor. When suddenly, in the distance, he saw a girl. It was his employer. Despite the severe wounds and broken bones, she's still breathing. It's incredible that such a fragile girl could survive this. There's no medicine, no people around, no one, and I can't help. I don't think she's going to last much longer with these injuries. Well, he couldn't leave her here. Since he had no time to think, he decided to take her with him. She could die at any moment. Fortunately, he knew this labyrinth perfectly and knew where the exit was. They managed to get out of that cave alive. When he got home, he heard that their expedition today had made the news. But that's not surprising, is it? It's not every day 5 people die in a dungeon, and all this might not have happened if we hadn't listened to him from the beginning. It hasn't even been 2 hours since everyone knows what happened. Luckily, at least Miss Jajong and Mr. Kim were saved. It's a good thing they didn't tape the whole thing. They would have blamed it on Mr. Kim, because then he'd have to pay the fine for a bunch of idiots who don't listen to anyone but themselves. He left some of his earnings to his sister Hyunji so she could buy something for herself. These are hard days. When suddenly, his sister comes out of the room, crying, and with a sad look holds out to him the envelope in which he had left her the money. Looks like she just found that money. That's a lot of money for her. She must have been scared. Well, Kim decided to give her the other half of the money so she wouldn't be sad and ask where he got it from. When all of a sudden, the father comes in and asks Kim where he got the money from. Kim was genuinely surprised that his father was home at this time because he's usually at work. Dad ordered Virgie to return the money to Kim because Dad thought Kim thought it was worthless, so he risked his life to get it back. Hyojae and Kim were not blood relatives. Kim's real parents died in the labyrinth a long time ago. But that didn't change the fact that Hyoji loved her brother incredibly much. She just didn't have the conscience to take the money. On which it was Hyoji Wooji who strongly resisted. She's the reason he went into the dungeon. When suddenly his father said something about how he thought he'd raised him properly, but he'd grown up selfish, which really wasn't the case at all. His father thought he was selfish because if something happened to him, they wouldn't survive it. But Kim took this risk because Hyoji's wedding is coming up and the money is desperately needed. If she knew he had gotten the money, risked his life, she would never accept it. Dad asked Kim to promise that it wouldn't happen again. No matter how much money he was paid, he wouldn't risk his life. That's what family is all about. If you take it upon yourself to raise a dungeon child, you get a decent amount of money. There have been many cases where a child has taken in a family just for them, because of which they rarely have such children killed their caregivers. But he was very lucky in that respect. He wasn't taken in for money, but because they thought he needed love and car. Even though they're having a hard time financially because of Hyunji's wedding, it's nothing. He'd do anything for her. And he also discovered that after the snake bite, he had an unknown tattoo of a labyrinth symbol on his arm. And not just any tattoo, but a magical one. After all, when you press it, a certain information window appears. In hopes of finding out what it was, he searched all over the internet. But he couldn't find anything. It's a green panel similar to the ones you often see in games. After a little thought, Kim decided that the abandoned labyrinth had chosen him to be the new master. And there's such a thing in games, too. Speaking of games, something appeared next to the portal item. What could that circle mean? It hadn't been here before. Without thinking, Kim decided to press it. It was as if everything around me had turned into a distorted reality. Could this really be a portal to the labyrinth?
Oh shit! It really is a portal! He's been transported back to this place where the snake bit him!
What? Again? She's so fast that Kim can't even keep up with her, let alone dodge her. You have to use all your strength to keep me from biting you. Kim managed to throw his cloak over the snake, but that won't hold the snake for long. He needs to get some kind of weapon. But the snake still wouldn't attack. With that moment of silence, the snake began to whisper, "You are too young and unfit to assume the burden of the crown. But I am in no condition to turn back the clock, so I will consider it fate." They couldn't believe their ears if the legends were true. And now he would take the throne of Naga. The king has fallen. Long live the king. I wish you good luck in your difficult reign. The serpent whispered one last time. Kim demanded an explanation from the serpent. He can't go back to this hell, where his family had died. He's avoided these strange labyrinths for years, but he had to come down here for money for his sister. It's fate. I should have heeded my father's advice and avoided those damned labyrinths. But there's no turning back now. When Hyoji's voice came out of the portal, she wanted to talk to him about his reckless act. Interestingly, sound from the outside world comes through the portal and sounds. What else is this portal capable of? When suddenly Hyoji decides to enter the room after all. We can't let her see that portal, so Kim leaps headlong into it. When Kim was back in his room, he felt his body tearing apart. But he was fine. Well, there's no time to figure it out. When Hyoji opened the door, she asked, what was that strange sound coming from his room? A scream suddenly appeared from his computer. Classico! Hyoji loved computer games, so she was eager to see what her older brother was playing. Running into the room, she said, "I never would have guessed my ever-so-secretive brother was interested in games." Kim was a little surprised at the words about his eternally closed-off brother, since he thought he was perfectly normal. Kim was not social, he had no hobbies, no friends, no girlfriend. He was always sitting in his apartment 24 hours a day. Hyoji was telling the truth. After Kim left the labyrinth, he tried his best to forget this horrible place. The peace he could never get used to made him wildly uncomfortable and panicky. The reason the other dungeon children were so drawn to the labyrinth was probably because of that. But that's not why Hyoji came. She wanted to apologize to Kim for going to the maze to earn money for her wedding. That's right, money. They stayed in the coat and the coat in the maze. As he talked to his sister, his coat looked up at some monster. When he saw the monster rummaging through his coat, Kim was surprised. Had the idiot stolen his money? Kim asked Hyoji to wait for him outside the door. He has some more illegal business to do in the game. As soon as he's done, he'll come out to her. Of course, it was a complete lie. He went back to the maze to get the monster money for his sister's wedding. However, the monster dragged his coat deeper into the labyrinth and threw it near the throne. Was it all a setup? After searching his coat, he realized he didn't have any more money. Everything else was there, though. But why would a monster need money? And then this green info box pops up again. It says the devil stole all his money. To find the devil, he'll have to synchronize and activate Enter the Maze. Kim was furious. He didn't understand why the devil needed his money. He can't even buy anything with it. Exhausted, he decides to sit down on this throne and to think over the next course of action. But as soon as he sat on it, he felt an incredible strength and energy that saturated him. and a game interface opened up in front of him, just like in a computer game. But all functions were closed for him because he didn't do the synchronization. But to find the devil and get his money back, he'll have to synchronize with Naga's maze. If it wasn't for that money, he'd never set foot here again, and I don't care what happens to this maze. Out of desperation, he decides to ensure synchronization after all. But before synchronization began, the system decided to test its characteristics. Kim didn't realize what was happening. After all, he had pressed the synchronization button. It definitely said that the gate would appear at once. He's probably wasting his time. It would be much faster to find this monster if he ran after it. When suddenly the test was complete and synchronization began. A bright light filled the whole place. An unknown voice appeared in his head. It said that the transformation of the labyrinth had begun, whatever that meant, taking into account the synchronized data of Maze Master Kim. Synchronization is complete. From now on, the labyrinth has completely changed beyond recognition. It now looks more like a castle than a soulless dungeon. The labyrinth is now very different from what Kim knew it to be. However, the entrance to the labyrinth has not changed its location. When out of the shadows comes the same devil who stole the money. He's obviously up to something. When Kim saw the devil, she screamed, "Hey, you idiot! You dare come to me in person?" I guess a normal person wouldn't have noticed. We wouldn't even know someone came in here. Kim's words, much to the devil's surprise. He didn't expect him to dare to go deep into the labyrinth, because he didn't know he was facing a new king. Kim advised him to give the stolen money back, or else he would rip him to shreds. Hell, I realize he fell into a trap, decided to placate Kim and held out to him, Ruby. It's worth over 100 million on the black market. Kim couldn't believe his eyes. How could a monster like Chert have a depth gem? Deep gems with a gem bug that can only be found in Geyser. They are found deep underground, or can be hidden in rare plants growing in the geyser. However, their extraction is so difficult that people choose to hunt the dangerous creatures. This is why the depths of the gems are so expensive. Even a 1-carat gem measures a couple million, the size of a thumb. Kim was sure that wasn't all the devil had. When he shook him, he found that he had another blue-colored gem. Without thinking twice, Kim takes both stones. After all, if he can sell them, he and even his grandchildren will never have to work again. But ironically, one of the stones slips out of his hands. I try to catch it. So he launches this little devil and he manages to escape. The money the devil stole is no longer important because Kim has 2 incredibly valuable gems on his hands. Suddenly, at the place where the blue gem had fallen, an incredible energy source that emitted white light appeared. A game window appeared, stating that Kim had sacrificed a mid-rank depth gem, and the damaged part of the maze would be restored and improved. Damn it! Kim was incredibly pissed off that he wasted one of the gems. But that wasn't all. He had 24 hours to upgrade his fortitude, and 72 hours to upgrade his maze rank. And in his dreams, Kim had already bought a new house for his family and a cool car. Instead, this precious gem went to waste. If you like this manhwa, let me know in the comments. And if I get 10 comments on the second part, I'll make a sequel.